Here's what you're missing over at patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we are talking with an author. An author, you might have heard his commercials running on the free episodes like Ask a Guide and whatnot about his book, The Heavens Falling. You can kind of see it up on the shelf behind him in his shot. And his name is Jonathan Lucci. And Jonathan, welcome to Addressing Gettysburg.
Thank you very much. It's really great to be here.
Pull that mic a little closer to you. Go ahead. You can pull it. You can be rough with it. Pull it.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Welcome. Thank you very much, first of all, for being a sponsor of the show. And I take it you were a listener before you became a sponsor. Is that how you?
Yeah, I'm a proud patron of Addressing Gettysburg.
A proud one. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. Thank you for that. All right. Your book, The Heavens Falling. It is a novel. And I have it right here, folks. And look at how thick this is. This is a thick novel. And this is volume 1.
Yes, of what I hope to be a trilogy.
Of a trilogy?
Yes.
Are they all going to be this thick?
They might be. Yeah, they might be.
You're the new John Jakes of
I suppose
Civil War.
North and South.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
And this kind of does have a North and South feel. You're following a family.
That's right. Yep.
The family is, what is the last name? I didn't write that down. The Dawsons, that's right. And so you've got 5 brothers.
Yep.
Matthew, Robert, Charles, Peter, and Luke. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, their parents are William and Emma.
Yep.
Now, we follow them through the war. So I'm gonna guess that they all go different paths.
Exactly.
Okay, where do they go?
Well, so I just want to start off by saying that the idea when I first had it was to write a novel about the American Civil War that was meant to be sort of epic in scale. Epic meaning simply on a large scale.
Right.
So I always felt like a lot of people get very pigeonholed into their area of the Civil War, whether it's the Eastern Theater or the Western Theater. I wanted to show just how vast a scale of an event this was for that generation. And so the idea was to show, using these 5 brothers, as well as their parents, and then everyone that they come in contact with, use them to show all the different, as many aspects as I could, essentially, of the war, from the military to the political, naval, diplomatic, etc.
So that is sounds daunting to me. I mean, because I've always been told, and I believe it to be true, that a good fiction has to have a foot firmly planted in reality.
Yes,
like a historical fiction.
Yeah,
right?
I think any meaningful fiction probably should have some reality to it. Yeah.
And so if you're going to do this where you have these 5 brothers go into different aspects of the war of the United States, let's say at that time, you've got to have at least a basic understanding of the Navy, the Army, the government, all these different things. Where do they go? So we got the Navy.
So roughly speaking, you'll have the reader's going to experience what it's like to be in the infantry in the Eastern Theater, what it's like to be in an artillery battery.
Nice.
The telegraph office at the War Department.
Okay.
Both in different ways, both river gunboats out west on the Tennessee and Mississippi River, as well as naval engagements in the Atlantic Ocean, so Hatteras Inlet, Port Royal, things like that, as well as through the father, without giving too much away, but through the father, really the political aspect of it when it comes to Congress in particular.
So how do you prepare yourself to write all of that in a believable way?
Well, I guess I should start by saying I do have, my education is in history.
Okay.
And I have loved the Civil War since as far back as I can remember, when I was 4 or 5 years old. I was the weird kid watching Ken Burns' The Civil War when the other people were outside playing. So,
nothing weird about that.
Growing up, it was my favorite thing in the world, and it's remained so. So, I've read about it my entire life. I did some, undergraduate work. My thesis in college was on Lee's Officer Corps at Gettysburg. And so I guess in a way, I've been preparing my whole life because I've been just reading for pleasure and fun. But then when I got to the actual, okay, I want to write about this, I did have, basic understandings of these different parts of the story. But I definitely had to research more specifically as I got to each part. And really what I tried to do, and what I hope the reader will see, is that I used a lot of primary sources. So, the characters are made up, but they are placed in real units, and the units go where those units went. Mm-hmm. A naval officer is placed on a real ship that goes where that ship went. And so I used the official records. A lot is probably the most common thing I use to research for this book. For example, if I was writing the scene about Gaines Mill, I simply went and found, the 83rd Pennsylvania's report from Gaines Mill, as well as Samuel Bates's History of Pennsylvania Volunteers, online, because you have to be like a millionaire, I think, to afford to buy that.
Yeah, but, you do. Or get lucky at used bookstores.
Yeah, exactly. So, I tried to use primary sources as much as I could to make the events as real as I could.
But, I mean, how long did it take you to write this?
So I started writing it when COVID first hit, and, we all had to go home and work from home. I decided, well, in addition to of my job as a business person, I have time, so maybe I'll try to finally do what I wanted to do and write a novel. So I started writing it. It took about 2.5 years, but I would say large sections of that time I would not write at all and kind of go back and forth. But if I was writing straight through, it probably would have taken maybe 6 months, I would guess.
So, but now, so you're using the ORs or using really whatever sources you can, right? I'm sure. But you still, and maybe this is a difference between you and me. Maybe you're more brilliant and you are able to, I don't know. I haven't done this. Maybe you're able to imagine what you don't already know. Navy life is different than infantry life.
And I'm actually glad you asked that, because I do want to make clear, there's people who are going to read the book who, if they are really, really expert in, say, the uniforms, or really expert in the exact commands an officer would have given, you're going to find things that you're going to say, aha. Right. I remember... I've never met Tim Smith, but I've listened to him so many times on things, and I know he can be a stickler for accuracy.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember I was writing one night, and I looked up from my laptop, and I said, this is really going to piss Tim Smith off. And my wife said, well, who's Tim Smith? And I'm like, well, you haven't been paying attention to me for the last couple of years, I guess.
You don't even pay attention to what I pay attention to.
But, there are things in there that are going to not be exact, I suppose, when it comes to maybe, again, the commands an officer might give in a tactical situation.
Do you remember what it was that you said Tim Smith wouldn't like?
I think I said it multiple times.
Oh, so, any one of them? Do you remember any one of them?
I do think that when I was writing the scene on the First Battle of Winchester, I had read Earl Hess's book on infantry tactics, but I was writing it and I had the unit make a maneuver that I wasn't quite sure how to phrase it. So I just tried to describe it as best I could, and I think that was one of them. Yeah.
Is that so? In that case, where you had the unit make a maneuver, did you make up the maneuver? Like, in other words, the fact that they made this maneuver,
that occurred.
So it actually occurred.
It did, yeah.
The maneuver. So how come there wasn't something in the primary sources?
Exactly. Yeah. What I've had trouble with, and I'd be interested in anybody who has a solution to this, is when you read the ORs, you read. Any of these primary sources, they take for granted things that we don't. So they would know exactly what an officer would have yelled in order to make that maneuver occur. And so, not being a reenactor, I didn't always have every piece of information for that. So I guess the point I always try to make to people is, if you look hard enough, you're going to find some things that are probably not exactly correct in terms of the commands that were given either on a ship or on a unit. But what I can say, and what I tried to set out to do, is tell a good story that has a great meaning for people about why the Civil War is important, why they should study it, what its meaning is for today from a human perspective. And to try to make it as accurate as I could, particularly in terms of units going where they really went. And when I have the characters come into contact with historical characters, trying to make those characters' personalities as accurate as I can.
So it's the same thing, I guess, that a movie maker is going to run up against, that you run up against it, or that you will run up against as more people read this, is that, you can't, your job is not to write a history. Your job is to write a story.
Exactly.
It's a fictionalized story.
Yep.
You need to come up with compelling characters and engaging and exciting storylines, put them in these situations that's going to get the reader going, I can't wait to read more. In fact, Cindy, my girlfriend, she started reading this last week. And now we had dinner with you, so she was very interested. And when she heard that you were coming on, she's like, oh, well, I want to read his book. So you gave me 3 copies, and I let her have one. Let's see here. I said, what do you want me to ask him? And she goes, well, there are also some things he talked about at dinner that were interesting. For example, if the characters were based off of people he knows, particularly William Dawson. Also having him talk about how much he tried to keep things historically accurate, which we just did. So William Dawson, let's get into him. Are the characters based off of people you know?
No, they're not.
Okay.
At least not consciously.
Did you put yourself into any of the characters?
I actually tried my best not to.
Okay.
So I think there's always a challenge, and I think this is common for fiction writers. When you're writing a story and you're being creative, it is very difficult sometimes not to make the character yourself. I'm sure there are aspects of each character that are probably me, but I consciously attempted to make them not just like me and not like each other. One of the challenges that I found was to not let the brothers, and try not to let their personalities get to the point where it's confusing which one is which. I wanted each to have their own personality, their own reaction.
So how do you do that without basing them off of somebody? I mean, again, this is why I think you're more brilliant than I am. I would have to base them off of someone I know, right?
Yeah.
And give them that personality, and Pete would say this, and this character's based off of Pete. So this is what he would say in this situation.
My guess, like I said, is that so I did not consciously model any of them after anyone in particular, but I would imagine, like anybody else, all of the collective experiences in my life have, left their effect on me, right? And so when I'm thinking of different personalities and I'm thinking of how to shape a character, undoubtedly, at least subconsciously, it's probably based on any number of people, but there's no specific person who I based it on.
So that's interesting to me that you don't do that, because especially because you're talking with 5 brothers, and I would feel that after a while I would start making them all sound the same.
And I hope it may be that I did, but that my effort was to have that not happen.
Well, so, like I said, Cindy's really into this, and she said the big question she has is, when is Volume 2 coming out?
I'm about a third of the way through.
Okay.
Yep.
And is this self-published?
It is.
Okay, so we'll get to how you can get it later on at the end, but now I lost my train of thought. So Volume 2 is coming out. That's the thing. So while we were going to the shore last weekend, she was driving, and I took the time to read through it a little bit. And because she said, he's really a good writer. And, usually when, you get these things, they're not particularly good writing. But you really are a good writer.
Well, thank you.
I was reading through it, and I was reading it out loud in my bad Morgan Freeman voice, and it was very good. And I was like, okay, enough with the Morgan Freeman. And then I just kept reading through the first chapter there.
Well, he would be my choice if it becomes an Audible book.
Well, if you can't afford him, I'll do my bad impression.
No, that works too.
The poor man's Morgan Freeman. But no, so you really are good at writing. And because that's the thing, is when you see a book this thick and it's self-published and it's a novel, your initial reaction might be, oh, Jesus.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah.
Because people have sent me things before, and I'm like, but this is really good.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And all right, so let's get into a little bit of, not enough kissing your ass. Let's get into a little bit of the story of that people are going to follow here. So the 5 brothers, they go off into different aspects of the society at the time of the war. What happens to them? Is it kind of like a Forrest Gump thing where they're witnessing these events in history?
Well, I should say, I think, so you find in the first scene, I do like to talk to people about the first scene. So the first scene of the novel, it actually takes place in the 1960s.
Right.
And it is a...
Listen to the rest of this interview and dozens like it. Support the show and get early access to special episodes, early and discounted ticket sales, and more. The second lieutenant level and above gets access to all monthly Patreon episodes. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, choose a tier, and join. And I thank you in advance.